Most people spend their lives trying to change what they do, thinking that if they can just get their actions right, they'll finally become who they want to be. We join gyms, download productivity apps, buy books we never finish, all with the hope that a tweak in our behavior will lead to transformation. But behavior is the surface. Identity is deeper, and identity is not built by what you do occasionally. It's shaped by what you think about consistently. We don't become what we do, we become what we think about. The quiet conversations you have with yourself when no one's watching, the ones filled with doubt or hope or regret or purpose, those are not background noise. They're blueprints. If you tell yourself you're not good enough, that becomes your truth. If you tell yourself you have potential, that belief starts to build a path forward. It's not magic, it's wiring. The brain listens to whatever story you repeat. Eventually, it obeys. Let me give you a picture. Imagine a person who tells themselves every day, I'm not a leader. They might have ideas, they might even have passion, but they second guess, they defer, they hold back. Why? Not because they can't lead, but because their thoughts won't let them. They're imprisoned by a story they wrote a long time ago and forgot to question. So their behaviors follow that narrative. They act small because they think. Now imagine someone else who tells themselves, I'm still learning, but I have what it takes to lead. That person will act differently. They'll ask better questions. They'll raise their hand more often. They'll take small risks. Why? Because they believe in the possibility of growth. They're not faking confidence, they're practicing belief. And that belief reshapes their identity over time. We tend to think identity is something we find, like it's hidden under a rock or locked inside a vault. It's not. Identity is something we build, moment by moment, thought by thought. You're not born a leader or an artist or an innovator. You become one by thinking like one, and thinking like one long before you have proof. But here's the trap. Most of us spend more time thinking about what we fear than about what we want to become. We obsess over what might go wrong, what people might say, how we might fail. And the more time you spend thinking about fear, the more your identity becomes built around avoidance. And eventually, it's not just that you're afraid, you become someone who avoids. And that's a very different life to live. Our brains are like soil. Whatever seed you plant, fear, gratitude, anger, hope, will grow if you water it. So the question isn't whether your thoughts are shaping you. The question is, what kind of person are they shaping you into? I once spoke to a young woman who told me she wanted to be a public speaker, but she said, I'm not naturally confident. I asked her, how often do you tell yourself that? She paused. All the time, she admitted. And I told her, that's your biggest barrier. Not the skill of speaking, not the fear of the stage, but the idea you've accepted about who you are. Because you cannot build a new life on top of an old mindset. Let me repeat that. You cannot build a new life on top of an old mindset. There are no neutral thoughts. Every thought is either building your identity or breaking it down. You might not notice the shift day by day, but over months, years, it becomes undeniable. Think of it like a compass. If you're off by just 1 degree, you might not notice it today, but walk far enough and you'll be miles from where you wanted to go. Your thoughts are that 1 degree. Slight, subtle, but deeply consequential. And this isn't about positive thinking. It's not about mantras and mirrors and pretending everything's fine. It's about truthful thinking. About choosing to focus your thoughts on what is possible, what is purposeful, and what is aligned with the person you want to become, even when reality hasn't caught up yet. This is why vision matters. Because vision is the future you begin rehearsing in your mind before the world ever sees it. And every time you imagine that future, every time you mentally walk into it, you lay another brick in the foundation of your identity. You start to think like the person who belongs in that vision. And thinking like that person eventually leads you to act like them. So if you don't like who you're becoming, don't start with your actions, start with your thoughts. Ask yourself, what story am I rehearsing every day? What beliefs have I accepted without question? What kind of person would I be if I thought differently? When we change our thoughts, we change our identity. And when we change our identity, The actions follow naturally. You don't need to force them. You don't need to fake them. They just become part of who you are. You become someone who finishes, someone who shows up, someone who leads, not because you followed a checklist, but because you rewired the core. You changed the script in your head, and the rest of your life began to follow the new narrative. It all begins with what you think about, because that's who you'll become. So the question is simple. Who are you becoming? And an even better question, what are you thinking about? There's a difference between wishing for something and believing in it. Wishing is passive. It floats in your mind like a nice idea, but it doesn't carry weight. It doesn't create change. Belief, on the other hand, is active. It has gravity. It anchors your attention, pulls your energy, and slowly, quietly reshapes your actions to align with it. And when that belief is focused, not scattered, not vague, but intentional, it becomes a force that turns thought into reality. Most people don't fail because they lack ability. They fail because they never fully commit to a belief. They move halfway toward a goal, keeping one foot in and one foot out, telling themselves it's safer not to go all in. And so they dabble. They try things, but they don't truly believe in them. Not deep down. They're hoping it works. But hope without belief is weak. It wavers. It retreats at the first sign of resistance. But belief, that's different. Belief says, this matters. This is real to me, even if no one else sees it yet. And focused belief goes even further. It says, this is what I believe, why I believe it, and I'm willing to align how I live around it. Because the truth is, what you believe drives how you behave. Always. Even when you don't notice it. If you believe you're unworthy of success, you'll sabotage opportunity. If you believe you're always behind, you'll chase things that don't actually matter. If you believe the world is against you, you'll start looking for proof that you're right, and you'll find it. But if you believe you are capable of learning, you'll face hard things with curiosity instead of fear. If you believe you bring value, you'll stop begging for permission to speak. If you believe your vision matters, you'll keep building it even when no one claps. Focused belief doesn't just help you endure, it helps you choose what's worth enduring. I once spoke to an entrepreneur who spent years building his company with barely any revenue, no followers, no validation. I asked him, what kept you going? He didn't hesitate. He said, I believed this work needed to exist. Not I hoped it would work out, not I thought it might go viral. He believed, and that belief became the center of gravity that shaped every decision. You see, belief is not something you feel when things are going well. Belief is what you hold on to before anything has worked, before there's proof, before the doors open, before the results arrive. It's the voice that says, even if no one else sees it, I do. That kind of belief doesn't need applause, it just needs clarity. And here's the irony. Most people think they'll believe in themselves after they succeed, but it's the other way around. You succeed because you first believe. Belief creates alignment. It turns scattered energy into focused movement. When you believe in a mission, your habits start shifting. You stop wasting time trying to please everyone. You start saying no to distractions. You begin measuring your day not by how much you did, but by how close you moved toward what matters. But unfocused belief, that's dangerous too. When you believe the wrong things rooted in fear, scarcity, comparison, you still get alignment, but it's alignment in the wrong direction. You might become incredibly good at playing small. You might become disciplined in your self-doubt. Because belief, focused or not, always grows roots. That's why you have to be intentional about what you believe. Ask yourself, is this belief serving me? Is it making me more courageous, more honest, more alive? Or is it making me shrink? If your belief system is built around staying safe, staying liked, or staying small, you're not building a life, you're building a prison. Focused belief, by contrast, frees you. It gives you a center, a reason to keep showing up even when no one is watching. It helps you weather disappointment because you're not chasing approval, you're building something you believe in. That's why some people can fail again and again and still get back up. It's not because they're stubborn, it's because their belief is focused on something bigger than results. Belief also clarifies identity. When you believe in a vision, you begin to ask, what kind of person do I need to become to make this real? You don't just dream about outcomes. You think about character. You start aligning your choices with the person who belongs in that future. That's how real change begins, not with discipline alone, but with the belief that fuels discipline. Think of belief like the frame of a house. If the frame is weak, it doesn't matter how beautiful the paint is, it's not going to stand. But if the frame is strong, even the storms won't shake it. Focused belief is your internal frame. It holds your mission steady while the world outside changes. And the stronger that frame, the more clearly others will see what you stand for. That's another hidden gift of belief. It's contagious. People are drawn to clarity. They follow conviction. They respond not to volume, but to alignment. When someone really believes in what they're saying, you can feel it. It's not loud. It's not forced. It's steady. And that steadiness gives people something to trust. So don't wait for someone else to believe in you. That's not where it starts. Belief is not given, it's chosen. And once you choose it, you begin to shape a life around it. Not instantly, not perfectly, but intentionally. And the more intentional you are about your belief, the more your actions begin to reflect it. And the more your actions reflect it, the more your reality shifts to match what you once could only imagine. You don't become what you want, you become what you believe. And belief is a choice you make every single day. Most people underestimate the true cost of negativity. We think of it as something that just makes a bad day worse, something annoying or inconvenient. But it's much more dangerous than that. Negativity doesn't just ruin a moment, it reshapes your mindset. It subtly rewires how you see yourself, how you see others, and how you see the future. And the worst part? Most of us don't even notice it's happening. And we think we're just being realistic, but we're not. We're being ruled by fear disguised as wisdom. Every negative thought you tolerate comes with a price. The price is your energy, your potential, your ability to act with clarity and courage. And over time, the price becomes even greater. It becomes your identity. You cannot entertain thoughts of failure every day and expect to feel confident when it matters. You cannot surround yourself with people who constantly complain and expect to stay inspired. And you cannot allow your inner dialogue to be driven by doubt and still believe you're building a meaningful life. That's not how the mind works. It listens to every word you say to others and to yourself. And it doesn't distinguish between truth and repetition. It believes whatever you tell it most often. Negativity may feel familiar. It may even feel safe. But it's slowly building a life you never wanted. It talks you out of the very actions that would move you forward. It tells you to wait, to hold back, to protect yourself from disappointment. And it dresses all of that fear up as logic. Why bother? It probably won't work. Someone else has already done it better. These are not questions, they're instructions. And when you follow them long enough, you build a pattern that becomes hard to break. I've met brilliant, passionate people who have done nothing with their ideas. Not because they weren't capable, but because they let negativity define the boundaries of their imagination. And when you let that happen, it's not just the idea that dies. A piece of you dies with it. The part that believes in what's possible, the part that dares to hope, the part that still wants to try. We talk about energy all the time as if it's unlimited, but it's not. Your focus, your belief, your resilience, these are limited resources. And negativity is one of the fastest ways to drain them. Every time you argue for your limitations, every time you dwell on the worst case scenario, every time you surround yourself with people who do nothing but complain, you are spending energy that could be used to build something better. You don't have to pretend everything is okay, but you do have to be honest about whether the story you're telling yourself is helping or hurting. Because negativity never shows up saying, I'm here to destroy you. It shows up quietly. It shows up as sarcasm, as criticism, as cynicism, as that voice in your head that says, don't get your hopes up. And over time, that voice becomes normal. It becomes the filter through which you see the world. But here's the truth. That filter is not fixed. You can change it. And it starts with awareness, with the courage to ask yourself, is this thought useful? Not is it true, because lots of true things aren't useful, Bad things might happen. You might fail. People might judge you. But focusing on those possibilities doesn't protect you. It paralyzes you with work. Growth begins the moment you take responsibility for your thoughts. It begins when you stop blaming your environment, your past, or your personality and start deciding how you want to interpret your experiences. Because between what happens and how you respond, there's a gap. And in that gap lives your power. Negativity tries to close that gap. It tries to convince you that your reaction is automatic, that you don't have a choice, but you always do. You can choose to see feedback as failure or as fuel. You can choose to see risk as danger or as opportunity. You can choose to see discomfort as a problem or as a path. Every single day, you're shaping your future with your thoughts. And if you keep planting seeds of fear, you can't be surprised when you grow a life full of doubt. But when you begin to plant something different, something hopeful, something constructive, something bold, you give yourself permission to become more than just a product of your past. And this isn't about toxic positivity. It's not about pretending life is easy or ignoring pain. It's about refusing to let your pain become your identity. It's about choosing to focus on what builds you instead of what breaks you. It's about acknowledging that even in the worst moments, there's still a choice to be made. And that choice matters. Some of the most resilient people I've met have lived through things that would crush others. But they made one crucial decision. They didn't let their pain turn into bitterness. They turned it into purpose. They took the same energy that negativity would have consumed and redirected it towards something better, something healing, something meaningful. Because the truth is, your mind is a garden. You don't get to stop weeds from growing, but you do get to decide what else grows alongside them. And the more intentional you are about what you plant, the less space there is for what doesn't belong. So take inventory of your thoughts. Pay attention to your internal dialogue. Look at your surroundings. Who are you listening to? What are you consuming? What voices are shaping the way you see yourself? These things are not passive, they are powerful. And if you don't choose what influences you, something else will. Negativity has a cost. And it's a cost far too high to ignore. It steals clarity, it dilutes purpose, it weakens courage. But when you see it for what it really is, not truth, but habit, you can begin to take that power back. You deserve a life built on vision, not fear, on hope, not doubt. And it all begins by paying attention to what you're feeding your mind. Because in the end, you don't just live the life you act on, you live the life you think about. We all want to do meaningful work. We want to build, to grow, to contribute something that matters. But most of us don't struggle with a lack of effort. We struggle with a lack of clarity. We spend our days doing more, moving faster, checking boxes. We chase productivity like it's a solution to confusion. But productivity without clarity is just movement without meaning. It's exhausting, and eventually it's empty. Clarity is not just about knowing what you want to do, it's about understanding why you're doing it. It's about defining the story you want to live in, not just the tasks you want to complete, because when your thinking is clear, your actions become purposeful. But when your thinking is cloudy, your actions become reactive. You start responding to pressure, not principle. And that's a dangerous way to live. We're told to hustle, to grind, to never stop moving, but no one tells us that the most important work often happens in stillness. That clarity is rarely born in chaos. It comes in moments of reflection. When you stop asking, what should I do next? And start asking, what actually matters here? Clarity is the quiet confidence that comes from alignment. It's the peace you feel when your thoughts, your values, and your actions are all pulling in the same direction. Without that, you can achieve everything the world calls success and still feel lost, still feel empty. Because activity alone doesn't equal purpose. I've met so many people who are tired, not because they're weak, but because they're misaligned. They wake up and jump straight into their to-do list, but they don't know what any of it is actually for. They're chasing goals that someone else set, living on autopilot. And the scariest part is they're doing it well, but doing the wrong thing well is still doing the wrong thing. It convinces you that motion equals meaning, that speed equals success, that as long as you're busy, you're fine, but if you've ever achieved something and immediately felt empty, you know what I'm talking about. That's not failure. That's the result of unclear thought turning into unclear action. Clarity changes that. Clarity gives your actions weight. It turns I should into I must. It turns maybe into definitely not, or absolutely yes. And that decisiveness isn't harsh, it's freeing. When you're clear on who you are and what matters, you stop chasing everything that doesn't. But clarity isn't something you find by accident. You don't stumble into it after a long day of distraction. It's something you create through intention, through self-awareness, through asking hard questions that most people avoid. What am I really afraid of? What do I actually value? Am I building a life I believe in or just surviving the one I inherited? Those questions are uncomfortable, but they're necessary because until you define what matters, everything will feel like it matters. And when everything matters, you're paralyzed. Clarity gives you permission to let go, to stop chasing validation, to stop mimicking someone else's path, to stop measuring yourself by a metric you didn't choose, and instead to build something rooted in conviction. I once spoke to a leader who told me he felt stuck. He had all the trappings of success, the title, the money, the respect. But he said, I don't know why I'm doing this anymore. That's a hard place to be, because from the outside it looks like you've made it. But on the inside, you're drifting. That's the cost of unclear thought. You can build a tower that touches the sky and still feel like you're sinking. Not because the work is wrong, but because the reason is missing. Clarity starts with identity. Not what do I do, but who am I? Because if you don't answer that question for yourself, the world will answer it for you. It will name you based on your output, your results, your image. But real clarity comes from within, from knowing your principles, your purpose, your values, and letting those things guide your decisions. It's not enough to think big, you have to think clearly. You have to know what you stand for so that when the pressure comes, and it always comes, you don't fold, you don't bend to what's popular. You stay grounded in what's true. Clear thinking leads to decisive action. It doesn't mean you always know exactly what to do. It means that when you act with intention. You act from a place of strength, not from fear. And that kind of action is powerful because it builds momentum, it builds trust, it builds character. And this is just as true on a team as it is in your own life. Teams that lack clarity drift. They argue, they spin their wheels, but teams that are clear on their mission, on their roles, on their values, they move with confidence. Not because they have all the answers, but because they're aligned on why they're doing what they're doing. The same goes for your relationships, your goals, your time. Clarity simplifies everything. It helps you say no faster. It helps you say yes more freely. It turns hesitation into conviction. And when you live with that kind of clarity, people feel it. They trust it. Because clarity breeds credibility. So if you feel stuck, overwhelmed, or lost, don't just ask, what should I do? Ask, what do I believe? What do I value? What do I want to contribute? Because the answers to those questions are the compass. And once you have a compass, the map becomes less important. You don't need to know every step. You just need to know the next right one. And you find that step through thought, through vision, through decision to stop rushing and start reflecting. The clearest thinkers aren't the loudest. They're the ones who know where they're going and why. And they act. Not to impress, not to keep up, but to build something real. So slow down. Get still. Ask better questions. Not because clarity is a luxury, but because it's a necessity. Because in the end, the life you build is shaped by the actions you take. And the actions you take are shaped by the thoughts you trust. And nothing changes until your thinking does. Most people want change. They want to become more focused, more courageous, more resilient. But they wait for a breakthrough, a moment, an epiphany, something big enough to flip the switch. The truth is, transformation rarely comes in a flash. It comes in repetition. In small, consistent thoughts repeated over time, until they become part of who you are. You become what you think about, not occasionally, not just when you're motivated, but consistently. Because consistent thought shapes your beliefs, and those beliefs become the foundation of your identity. Your identity is not fixed, it's fluid. It's shaped every single day by the thoughts you allow, the stories you tell yourself, and the voice you listen to the most. If you constantly think of yourself as someone who isn't good enough, who's always behind, who always fails under pressure, that's not just a thought, that's a story you start to believe. And once you believe it, you'll start to behave in ways that reinforce it. That's how identity is formed, not just by experience, but by the interpretation of experience. The brain is always learning, it's always adjusting. And it listens closely to repetition. When you tell yourself something often enough, your brain accepts it as familiar, and what becomes familiar starts to feel true. That's the danger of unchecked thought. A lie repeated enough times becomes your truth, not because it is, but because you stopped questioning it. But here's the good news. The same is true in reverse. Positive, constructive, empowering thought, when practiced consistently, can rewire the way you see yourself. You can teach your brain to believe something new, something better. You can decide, I'm the kind of person who follows through. I'm the kind of person who learns from failure. I'm the kind of person who builds something meaningful. And if you feed those thoughts consistently, they start to take root. They begin to shape your habits. And your habits begin to shape your future. This isn't about blind optimism, it's about disciplined thinking. But about realizing that every time you repeat a thought, you are laying down a pattern. And those patterns become beliefs, and beliefs build identity. You don't need to fix everything overnight. You just need to consistently think in a way that aligns with the person you want to become. Because identity isn't something you uncover, it's something you build. And you build it by choosing your thoughts the way an architect chooses the foundation of a house, intentionally, carefully, and with the long-term structure in mind. Think about this. The most confident people you know aren't confident because life handed them more validation. They're confident because they built a belief system that supports confidence. They trained their minds to look for lessons instead of failure. They chose to focus on growth, not comparison. And they kept showing up to that mindset again and again until it became automatic. You can do the same, but it won't happen by accident. It happens through consistency. The hard part is, most people quit too early. They try to change how they think, but when they don't feel different right away, they stop. But consistency isn't about how you feel, it's about what you do. And often, the change is happening long before it's visible. Think of it like a muscle. The first time you lift a weight, you don't see growth, but something is changing underneath, and if you stay with it, that change becomes visible. That's how consistent thought works. Quiet at first, invisible, but powerful. Rewiring your identity through thought also means becoming aware of what's already been wired in. We all carry thoughts that were handed to us by parents, teachers, culture, failure. You're not smart, you're too much, you're not leadership material. These ideas get planted early, and if left unchallenged, they become part of our internal narrative. But just because something was planted doesn't mean it has to stay. You can uproot it, you can replace it, but only if you consistently choose to think differently. And that choice matters more than motivation. Motivation comes and goes, it's emotional. But consistent thought is strategic. It doesn't need permission or energy, it just needs commitment. That's why rituals matter, morning routines, journaling, mindfulness, reflection, anything that gives you time and space to remind your brain, this is who I'm becoming. Because identity doesn't come from a title or a moment of achievement. It comes from small decisions repeated daily. It comes from saying, I may not feel like it today, but I'm still going to think like the person I'm becoming. And that consistency creates evidence. Over time, you begin to trust yourself. Because you're no longer relying on willpower alone. You're building identity. And when your thoughts and your identity align, something changes. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop doubting whether you belong. You stop hesitating every time you face resistance. You act, not because you're forcing it, but because that's just who you are. And people notice. They see the shift, not in how loud you are, but in how steady you've become. Not in how much you talk about change, but in how consistently you show up to it. Because consistency builds credibility. And nothing is more powerful than someone who knows who they are and has thought about it deeply. So if you want to change your life, don't start with your schedule. Start with your thoughts. Get clear on who you want to be, and then think like that person every single day, even when you fail, even when no one sees, even when it's hard. Because identity isn't found in a breakthrough, it's found in consistency. And you are not the exception. You are not stuck. You are not too late. You are simply one thought away from beginning the process of becoming someone new. Not all at once, but over time, repetition, alignment, clarity. That's how you change a mind. That's how you change a life. And it all starts with choosing every day what kind of thought you will believe in